Recently, in the devotion, I talked about Exodus chapter 3, in which we discover that God listens to God's people. And we talked about how important it is for us to listen to one another. We find ourselves now in the book of Psalms, where we hear another reminder that God listens. But what do we expect when God listens? Let's take a closer look. Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I lay it all out before you. Then I wait expectantly. We lay out our prayer requests to God. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We wait expectantly for God to respond. Anything wrong with that? No, of course not. In fact, when we believe we have a God who listens, we ought to also believe that we have a God who responds. We should expect that God would respond. It'd be like talking to another person, asking a question, and having them look at you with a blank stare with absolutely no response. We'd be frustrated, and rightly so. When you ask a question, you ask for an answer. That's just normal. It is with God too. When we lay our prayers out to God, our requests, as the psalmist says, we ought to expect a response. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where the problem lies is when the response that we expect is a little bit more narrowed down, leaving no room for God's creativity, imagination, and possibility. What I mean by that is sometimes we have an expectation of exactly how God should respond. Not just an expectation that God will respond, but we have an idea of exactly what God should do when God responds. I remember when I was a kid, I had the opportunity to go see an asteroid show or something along those lines, a shooting star display, going out into the country to look up at the night stars in the middle of the summer and see shooting stars. I remember it wasn't going to start until about 11:30 was at least the projected plan, and my friend's mom was going to take us, and it was a night before we had some important things going on. Now, at the time, I was extremely disappointed that I couldn't go. As an adult, I'm thankful that my parents did not let me go. But I remember at that time praying fervently, praying that God would change my parents' mind, that suddenly I would be given the opportunity to go and see what must be a marvelous and wonderful sight. I wasn't allowed to go. Now, I had very specific expectations of what God's response would be. And God didn't respond that way. Was it that I shouldn't have expected God to respond? No, I don't think that's it. Was it that God's response was wrong? No, again, not the case. In fact, had I been allowed to go, it probably would have been a problem. I would have been far too tired the next day, and it wasn't the healthiest decision for a young kid to be out that late at night. So God's response was probably more to encourage my parents to stay strong in their reminder that I should not be out that late. When we expect God to respond, God does respond. It's just not always the way that we might hope God would respond. But it is the way that we need God to respond. Amen.